Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is your Tuesday, February 6th edition of Generally Irritable. Welcome, 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 welcome. So, as the description and the title of this video alluded to, actually said directly, we're going to be joined today by former officer David Rodriguez to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of policing. Now, you guys, you've heard me say probably 1,000 times, at least at this point, that, there are problems within certain communities. Certain people still are facing discrimination, right? There's legitimate problems in this country that minorities are dealing with, or, people generally, people groups. And what oftentimes happens is the most crazy, most outlandish, far fringes of any given ideology are the ones that we hear from, and the ones that they're the ones that make the most noise, right? The majority of Americans, the majority of people are somewhere in the middle. They're just living their life. They're fine, whatever. But then you have the folks on the right and the left, or different sides of any particular issue, and they're just screaming. And they're screaming so loud, and they're saying such ridiculous, outlandish things that the rest of us just kind of tune out. For example, the example I always give is that my husband Benjamin is dark-skinned black man. Okay. In Hollywood for years, the only gigs his agent was sending him was for thug number one and drug dealer number two. He's not getting leading man or like romantic comedy. He's always cast as a bad guy. And there are other legitimate issues for black people in the film. And I'm not going to spend all day talking about it. But then what happens is the backlash of Oscars so white and this and that makes it so much so, it makes it so like demonizing of white people, most of whom are absolutely clueless as to what's going on or that there's a problem. It's like blaming them for what some people at the top, the decision makers, are doing. And so what happens is you create a divide, and it makes it worse. And we have the same problem when we're talking about policing and law enforcement in this country. Many folks like myself would consider myself a back the blue person, right? I've had tenants who were police officers. I still have a Burlington PD sticker on my car, even though I live near Austin, Texas now. Right? I understand the importance and the value of having law enforcement. I have been the victim of a crime. I have also been the perpetrator of a crime, and someone needed justice. Okay. So I believe in law enforcement. I see that there is a role for it, right? But then you've got the Black Lives Matter people who are like, stop the genocide of black people by police officers. And everybody's kind of like, I hear what you're saying, but statistically speaking, that's not true. And so when they say stuff that's just not true, salacious, outlandish, you actually ruin the opportunity to talk about the real problems with some law enforcement and the overreach. Sovereign immunity, all these immunities given to elected officials, to police officers, qualified immunity. These things are understandable, but they also come with consequences. And if we don't get to have a real conversation about the abuses in police stations, not just of the citizens, but of one another, how the administration can be abusing the police officers, how if you don't close ranks and go along with what so-and-so says or does, that you get blacklisted, that you get targeted, that they'll plant evidence on you and make you look, and it's a whole thing. So then police officers not only are dealing with being attacked and ridiculed out on the street, risking their lives every single day. But then when they come back to the precinct where they're supposed to feel safe, where they're supposed to be encouraged and supported and given proper guidance and training and tools, they're attacked there too. And so it's no wonder that police officers have some of the highest suicide rates in the country, some of the highest drug abuse and alcoholism, because they're coping with all of this trauma and all of this suck. And are they getting what they need to actually do a good job? Okay. And that's just police, you guys. That's on the local law enforcement level. And if anybody out there watching today, if you're a police officer, if you're former law enforcement, definitely make sure to leave a comment today. Let people know the kind of things that you dealt with or what you wish citizens had known about policing. So, local law enforcement, right? That's one whole aspect of this issue. But then you have federal law enforcement, FBI, CIA. We've seen the destructive overreach and power grabbing that those agencies have done. We've watched them destroy people's lives who've done basically nothing, or at least stuff that other people haven't been arrested and thrown in jail for or brought in on a subpoena or whatever the crap is. We see how justice is not applied equally. And ultimately, I think that's what, if Black Lives Matter had come out and said, hey, we just don't see justice being doled out equally. I would guess 90% of Americans would agree with that, especially if they've ever been in trouble with the law or crossed someone in law enforcement. Imagine what people in states where they have red flag laws, imagine what they're going through, losing their due process. Just having cops come into their house and take their stuff and then no longer being able to protect themselves. Oh my goodness, you guys, it's crazy. So I want to talk a little bit about Vermont. Of course, Vermont has my heart, you guys. You know it. I was born and raised there. I had it tattooed on my body, for God's sake. And every day that goes by that I get notifications still from the Burlington School Board supervisor, every time I open my Vermont Daily Chronicle by Guy Page, I am reminded of why we moved, why we left, why we sold the house, because it's crazy, you guys. 14% tax increase in Burlington alone for Burlington School District. And that doesn't just cover Burlington. That is going to be felt by the entire state. So if you're in like Little Fletcher, your little school system that doesn't have as much money, you don't have as much and as many kids, well, guess what? Your dollars are now going to go to Burlington because they don't know how to budget properly. And what do we get for it? We get worse schools, we get fights, we get more crime, we get teachers being abused. It's absolutely outrageous, ladies and gentlemen. So if you are not already subscribed to this channel, go ahead, hit the like button, share it with your friends, share it to your page, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode, because YouTube and the algorithms of these other social media platforms do not like us. They don't like the message that we are sharing with you. They don't want us talking about these things, okay? The goal is for us to be divided. So instead, let's have reasonable conversations where we get to know each other a little bit better. So don't just subscribe to this channel. Go to Vermont Daily Chronicle, get the newsletter in your email every day, and go click the donate link and give them some support so that they can keep bringing you the news in Vermont, y'all, because they literally are the only publication that is telling you the truth and sharing stories that you're not going to hear anywhere else. So without too much waiting, y'all, let's bring in Mr. David Rodriguez. Hello, sir. How are you this afternoon?
How you doing, Eric? I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, fantastic. I see that you are in your work clothes. So Mr. David Rodriguez, you are not just a former police officer, you also you build homes and remodel and put up metal buildings and stuff.
Yes, ma'am. I retired from policing back in April of last year, and I'm solely 100% now a, general contractor, builder, kind of whatever you want me to do, I can do. Basically, I'll learn it and get it going.
Fantastic. So you retired last year. Now I'm looking at you, okay? I see your face. I'm gonna let's make you a little bit bigger. You don't look old enough to be retiring. So share with our viewers a little, just give them like the quick, because we're going to get into all the details a little bit later, but just give them like the elevator version of your time, why you decided to leave policing, I guess.
So basically, just to kind of give in layman's term, like in the state of Texas, if you have at least 10 years of consecutive years, let me adjust my little camera here so you can see me. If you have 10 consecutive years in law enforcement, they passed a bill where you can basically retire at 10 years. So basically, I had 3 years of active military, and then I went in right into policing, and I did National Guard with the policing simultaneously. And then when I hit my 10-year mark, I decided, like, you know what, I just didn't like the way that the flow was going with the PD. I didn't like the politics. And I decided that, doing something for myself to not cap myself off and to kind of have the broad aspect of just being able to do what I want when I want is what I wanted. And so I just jumped into it. Um,
So you're not somebody who just, like on a whim was like, "Oh, I'm going to go be a police officer." You have been serving your country, you've been serving your community for years. And
mhm.
so this was really, some might say this is like a part of who you are. This is a value that you have. And so I remember I was really struck when we first met and we were talking about it, and I could see the disappointment. I could see the like. I know you're a man, so I don't want to like emasculate you, but you know what? Like I could see like you were hurt and
Hmm.
disappointed,
Yeah,
if that's fair to say.
disappointed is a good word to use. Yes, very disappointed, and kind
Yeah.
of the way that things ended in my career, but just the way policing ended. It's how it's kind of going down a certain way. Like you said, started active duty back in 2009. I did a total of 3 years active, and then I decided that I didn't want to do the active duty life no more, just because I was too far away from the family. I did a
Mm.
deployment, and I was like, I can't do these year deployments. I knew my unit was going to have another rotation coming up soon, so I said, you know what, I'm going to do something locally. So I decided to serve as a law enforcement officer, which I really enjoyed, really loved, had passion for it. I was really good at it. And I started off like anybody else. You start off something new, you're excited, you're gun ho, you're going to do everything in your power to try to get to that next level. Try to learn as much as you can, and then start promoting. But for me, it always, for some reason, it always was harder than it needed to be when it came to promotion or get to that next level. I always felt like there was always something kind of weighing me down, or somebody kind of having control of my destiny. And it got to like year 8 when I kind of realized it. I think that's when COVID really kind of set in and kind of opened my eyes to like things that were happening. And I just, it's just a lot of things that happened at one time that kind of led me to the decision
Hmm.
that when I hit my 10 year.
That's what whenever you're having, being a police officer is hard enough, right? Like that's a hard enough job. But then when, like you said, around the same time, you got the coup coming on, then you got BLM riots and things like that. And so, the you probably, I would imagine you went from, here in Central Texas, basically going from being a pretty well respected community member, somebody with a job that's honored and respected, to now it's like you're the world's worst person, and like you're racist just by nature of being a police officer. And oh, by the way, it doesn't matter that your last name is Rodriguez, you're white, or you're white adjacent, because you're a police officer and it means you hate your people. I mean, the rhetoric was outrageous. Is that when you felt like a turn happened, or were you dealing with politics in the PD even before that? Oh, let's see. I don't have audio. Let's see. Benjamin, can you hear on your end? All right. So when we get David's audio back, we will bring him back in, y'all. David, the best thing to do is go ahead and leave and come back in. All right, you guys. So I know for me, to be honest with you, I didn't really think too much about policing. And maybe that is the nature of being white. Maybe that's my white privilege. My Wahite privilege is that I didn't really think about policing back in the day because I either only dealt with police when I was doing something wrong or when someone did something wrong to me. And so they were there. It wasn't until the BLM riots that I realized that there might be some kind of a systemic problem. And so I did start to get curious and start to want to learn more. And the more I learned, the more I realized that, like, yeah, there's sucky people, but also, like, it's not nearly as bad as these people are saying. So, David, was it when the Black Lives Matter riots rolled through that things changed for you, or were you dealing with politics in the PD before that?
Yeah, none of the outside politics, the Black Lives Matter, any of that really affected my decision at all. I mean, as a
Mm,
professional, you have to take you have to take everything for what it's worth. People are upset, people are mad, and they have every right to be mad at something that an officer did or didn't do, or so you're always going to be scrutinized, for doing the right thing or doing the wrong thing. So I that really never affected me at all. Like from year one to going to the COVID years, and all the Black Lives Matter, nothing really of that nature affected me. We were just told that, hey, if it did come about it, just handle it like any other
mm,
any other situation professionally, give them respect, and hopefully you get respect back. And I never really had an issue. What really kind of got me going down the into the politics was the internal politics. I think is worse than anything you can ever deal with when it comes to politics. It's all the
yeah.
internal, all the what's going on inside the PD, who's doing what, who has the power to change your
Mm,
career, who has the power to hold you back. And I really didn't know about that because, like, as a professional, I didn't get involved with that. I did my job. I hung
yeah.
out with some of my shift mates here and there, and I really didn't get too involved with the politics because I was like, it's not affecting me. I don't really want to know if I don't need to have to know. But when it started knocking on my doorstep, that's when I had no choice.
Mm,
I had to get involved because it was right in front of me. So those are the biggest things, like, that I look back at on policing, is if we had some kind of accountability and control inside the agency
mm,
where there was not as much politics, not as much of a good old boy system where everybody got promoted or got the opportunity because they deserved it, they worked hard, they did everything in their power to get to that next level, learned as much as they could, put the work in. If that was like in every PD and they handled it that way, then there would be a lot more law enforcement officers, and people would want to join the agencies. But now that you see, no one wants to be an officer, and if they do become an officer, they're only there for a short amount of time, and then they're gone because they're like, I can't handle this. I can't. I got to deal with all this other stuff outside, and then I got to deal with all the internal stuff. They're like, forget
yeah.
it. Forget it.
So, do you think that, when people say like systemic problems in policing, would you say that it has to do with, you just mentioned people, like, who's getting picked basically to get promoted and put in leadership and management positions? I'm assuming leadership and management is picking the next leadership and management. So
Hmm.
if you're not friendly with and go along with whatever they're doing,
Hmm.
was it that kind of stuff that you were dealing with? Like,
Yeah, I mean, exactly. If you weren't on the right side of of the fence and you were,
Mhm.
not on the right team, uh, then you basically got the scraps. You may get an opportunity here and there because there's no one else that wants to fill that position. But as far as the key
Mm.
prime positions, you would never get looked at it because they already knew who they wanted, and they would say, "Oh, we're going to test, we're going to interview, just to kind of CYA, just hey, we're going to do it just because we're going to walk through the process and make sure there's no favoritism involved." But everybody already knew, and then it got to a point where it got so ridiculous that they were like, "We're just going to pick the people and we're going to put them in these positions, and we don't really care what you think." And that's when it kind
Wow.
of like opened my eyes to like, I just, I'm not going to win that. I'm not going to win that battle. So like, it's like, you go mudding and you get stuck in the mud. It's like you're spinning them tires. Eventually you may get out, if you get some help, you're going to get out, but more likely you're going to be stuck, and
Yeah.
then once you, and that's another thing, once you say something or you stick up for yourself, then the problem just magnifies.
Then it's
Now they,
worse.
now there's a target. Now they got a reason to keep you quiet or to make your life, unhappy, so that you can make a decision like, okay, where I'm going to stay or I'm going to go. And I'm not saying that that's how I made my decision. Like I had already been talking about this for years because I just felt like, being in law enforcement, um, when you don't really have a sense of purpose, like when you're going to work just to go to work and there's not really a purpose because you're not really being seen, you're not really getting any kind of accommodations, you're just going to work to go to work, and there's no morale at the PD, you're just kind of just
Mm.
doing the motions, and
And I imagine you can get away with that kind of thing if you have an office job that doesn't matter, but you can't have an attitude like that for a job like policing. I mean,
no,
I
I mean,
can't imagine.
no, you have to. This policing has to be something that you want to do. Like it has to be a
Mm.
calling. A calling. Like if
Mhm.
you're going to genuinely do policing for the right reasons, you have to have a calling for it. And there's not a lot of people that can do this job and do it well. I mean, there's a lot of people that can do the job, but doing it well and doing it level-headed and doing it in a way where you're being fair, like by the book, by the laws, doing everything right. There's not a lot of people, and I used to tell people all the time because I was an FTO for a while, and I had
Wait,
PPOs that would
what's
come.
a
A
wait,
field, a
don't
field.
use acronyms. You know, people like me are gonna have no idea what you're talking about. So what was that one? The P
So
wait.
I was the FTO, field training officer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we had rookies, basically. We called them PPOs. They're basically rookies that you would teach, and you would basically teach them the ropes. And
Mm.
they would always ask questions, And one time, a rookie came to me and said, "Man, it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of people that want to do this job, or we're not. Why can't we hire enough people? Because it seems like we're always short staffed." And that
Mm.
was always the thing. Like even when I first started, it was like we're always short staffed, we're understaffed, we don't have enough staffing for patrol, but then we're giving these promotions to these people to do specialized positions, and like patrol is the number one
Mm.
reason why we're doing policing, because we're helping the community and the citizens, and no one and we never had it staffed, right? So I told him,
Interesting.
I said the reason why is because you can find good people to do policing, but you can't find good cops. It's a big difference. Like there's good people that can do policing, but finding good police officers is another story. And some
Mm.
of them never really understood it. And I said, because you can be a good person and you can do this job for what it's worth, but being a good officer separates you from like the conflict, the trauma, the high intensity type situation where you have to make a split second
Mm.
decision on something. And if you can't do that and you can't control conflict when there's a mob of people that are going crazy because their son just got beat up, or like if you can't walk into a situation and knowing that you're going to control it, then this is not the job for you, because you're going to get
Mm.
eaten up, or they're going to take advantage of you because they know what you're about. And
It it almost seems like having combat veterans would be better for as police officers. Like if you've ever had to deal with like being fired upon or like having something like being in a military, war zone would make you a better police officer. Is that crazy of me to think, or does that actually make it worse?
I mean, yes and no. You have to also understand that everybody did different jobs does different jobs in the military. So
Mm.
your 11 Bravos, your infantry guys, or your Marine guys that are infantry, they're going to have a different mindset than the guy that was behind the desk doing supply. I'm not saying they got more advantage, but their mindset and their
Mhm.
training is a lot different. So
Yeah.
in policing, you can't always be gun ho. You can't always pull your gun out and ask questions later. You can't shoot first, ask questions later. So, if you're one of those
Yeah, we don't
guys
need
that,
Rambo
yeah. So
in as on the Georgetown PD.
yeah. So if you're one of those guys that just like always high strung and always like, we got to go out there and kick doors in, in this society, you can't do that no more. Maybe back in the policing, maybe even when I first started, you could probably get away with that. But then the way society is now, you have to control everything by your mouth. I mean, you have to be able to control everything by your mouth. I mean, your best tool is
Mm,
talking to someone. If you cannot talk to someone and talk them off a cliff, then this job is going to be very hard for you. I'm not saying you can't do the job, but it's a very hard thing to learn. And I
yeah.
told people all the time that they were like, I run into people, how many times do you draw your gun? How many times you did? I said, honestly, man, I talked people off the ledge. I was assertive when I needed to be assertive, and I was your friend when I needed to be your friend. And
Yeah.
99.9% of the time, the conflict was resolved. It's when you become aggressive or you get real aggressive with that person, they use your aggression towards their aggression, and then it's like
Yeah, and it
fighting fire with fire,
escalates.
and it escalates. Yeah. So I tell people all the time, 99% of the time, if you can talk to someone and you're fluent and you're passionate, and you have compassion for someone that's going through some times, you win the battle 100% of the time. If that one guy that comes in and thinks he's going to just control it by aggression, they're gonna not. I've seen it. I've done it.
Yeah.
I've been part of talking down a situation and using my verbal. They called it verbal judo, to talk to people. And then I have a corporal who's supposed to be my supervisor come running in guns ho and starts stirring up the pot.
Oh, wow.
So and that's another thing. You get these positions and you get people in these positions that think they should be supervisors, but how much time have you put on the street to really learn the craft? I mean, and
Mm,
that's the thing about it. People don't understand. People just think, I learned this. I went to the academy, did 9 months or whatever, a year, and I know the craft and I'm good. That's
yeah.
like Michael Jordan saying, "Hey, I picked up the basketball one time and I could dunk from the free throw line." Like, it doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
a
you
lot
have
of a lot of the like accidents or problems that you hear about are rookie cops. They're not accustomed to dealing with the
hmm
adrenaline rushes and they're chasing
Yep.
somebody and I'm really not trying to cut on anyone, but the more you deal with stressful situations, the better you deal with stressful situations and
hmm
that's just what is so.
Yep.
The longer you handle firearms, the better you are with your uh, you know, uh, trigger discipline, the
Yep.
more conscious you are of where you're pointing it or doing what it like.
Yeah, it's a craft. I tell people all the time.
Mm,
It's something that you have to understand that the more you do it, the better you become. And if you don't understand it, if you don't think that, then I don't know what we're doing, what job we're doing, because
mm,
I could tell you, if you deal with one person, it's not going to be the same situation every time. You're going to have to take a little bit from that situation to use it on this situation, just because you kind of can pick and choose. But it is a craft. It's something that you have to work on, and you have to be willing to work on. And like I said, if you can have compassion for people and you can talk to them like they're humans, you
mm,
can get anything you want. Like my PPOs used to freak out when I would talk to people and they're like, man, this dude wanted to fight us, and over here you're having him tell you what he did yesterday, or what his kids names are, like they're freaking out. And it's like,
yeah,
because you have to understand, if you fire them with aggression, they're going to fire back with aggression.
yeah,
If you come to them and you're like, "Hey, brother, I'm trying to help you. Like, this is what we're trying to do, and this is what we're here for. We don't want to go
yeah,
into that other side of things." And you
yeah.
just talk to them.
You're often seeing people at their very worst moments
Worse.
ever, right?
Hmm
And so imagine if you're dealing with somebody who's just been hurt, had their kid hurt or something like that. I mean,
Yep.
you're seeing red and
Yep.
not reasonable anymore,
Yep.
right?
It's
And
yeah. It totally.
and I think that was I remember hearing, who told me that. They said any day of the week that could be me. It
Hmm
could just as easily be me on the other side of this situation as,
hmm
XYZ person.
Yep. Yep.
Any
Exactly.
wrong, one wrong decision or one wrong bad interaction. And I just find it so strange to me. And perhaps I'm asking you to speculate, David, okay?
hmm
Given that the nature of policing, as we've already been discussing, that it's challenging, it can be traumatizing, that you have to really learn it, you have to hone a craft. Given all of those things, I would think then it would make police officers more likely to be kind to each other, to work together, to be cooperative, and to be integrous and make sure that everything is above board so they don't make, like, I know I personally, especially as an accountant, I feel like who I work with reflects on me. So I want to be careful who I hire to help my clients. Like, what if I get them a CPA and then they embezzle their money or something like that, So
Hmm.
why is it that you think that instead of being a more collaborative, cooperative community, it's actually more negative and I don't know, cronyosity. I don't know what the right word is to use there.
I think the biggest thing is what they that phrase says, stay humble.
Mm,
There's not a lot of that. There's not a lot of that. It's I know more than you, or my way's better than yours, or my way the highway. That it's
mm,
like that phrase, like there's too many chiefs, not enough Indians type. Like
mm,
we're all a personality type guys. No one wants to take a back seat. Everybody wants to be the
mm.
first one to do something, or to show out in front of command so that they can get something, or be acknowledged for something.
Yeah.
It's not about the service no more. It's not about the true meaning of why do you become a police officer? Like, you're not
Mm,
going to make a lot of money. I mean, I was at 10 years, I was barely breaking $80,000 for 10 years of service. Like,
yeah.
it's not about the money. I mean, you can go to other agencies and make more money on paper, but really, are you making more money? I mean, they're taking a lot of retirement. I mean, really, is
Mm,
it's not about the money. So what is it? And it's that people are just not humble no more. Like,
yeah.
you can't take the fact that your buddy can do something better than you, and you can't learn from your buddy that it does that better than you. Like, if people took that in consideration, like, hey, Rod actually does this better than me, let me learn from Rod, rather than try to break Rod down and make him look like he's not doing the things right. You know what I'm saying? So that
Yep.
I don't know why that's that way. Like I said, I think maybe because a lot of people think that that's what they have to do, or maybe it's something taught from their people that they've learned from their what they call it,
Mentors or
mentors. Yeah,
trainers or
like
whatever.
mentors or trainers. Maybe that's just a taught habit, because the fact that that's what they're being taught in field training.
Yeah.
But I don't know. But I mean, if people took more of a back seat and were just a little bit more humble in things, I think policing could be great, man. I mean,
Yeah.
the agency that I was, we had a great community where you could be really involved with the community, and the community wanted you to be there. The community wanted you to be involved. But if you don't take that in consideration, and you're all gun ho and all about the flash and all about making the news, it's
Yeah.
not about that. I mean, I didn't get into policing to make the news. I got into policing to try to help and make a difference,
Mm,
and and really try to hone in on what for me, spiritually. And another thing too is, a lot of people in law enforcement, they don't have God on their side, man. They don't have a spiritual power.
mm.
They don't have that that inside and that eternal clock of, like, it's not about me. It's about what I'm
Oh.
doing for the community. You know,
Well, and I
and
can see how that would be the big difference. I think you might have just hit on something really important, David, because in a lot of these conversations I've often questioned, people are like, "Oh, de-escalation and we need people who, really care." And I get that, and I'm not saying that that's a wrong way to think. But then I also am like, okay, yeah, but when it's time for the bad guy to get got, I don't need the officer to care about my feelings. I need you to go shoot the bad guy. I need you to go murk somebody. I need to know that and so my thought was like the personality type that is going to be willing to go run around and potentially get shot at and risk their life, is it reasonable to also expect them to be like a social worker and have that level of empathy? And, my thought was no. Like, no, I don't think that's reasonable. I don't think it's reasonable to expect the same person who could be a social worker to also be a police officer. But I almost wonder if that spiritual piece, right? If you have a relationship with a creator and that is what's driving you, an attitude of service towards your community, a want to make things better, like that sounds like it comes from your creator rather than just straight testosterone.
Yeah, yeah. And to speak on that first part of it, I mean, we all learn in an academy. At the end of the day, it's you go home at the end of the day. You know, you have to make
Mm,
decisions that are not the best decision. I remember a sergeant one day said, if you can't go into a house on Christmas and possibly shoot somebody on Christmas Day, you know, then you're probably in the wrong profession because
wow.
you never know what house you're walking in. You never know what's in that house. You never know what they're doing or plotting, and it may be your life or their life. You know,
Yeah.
and it's not to say that you have the right to do that, but when we're trained and we're given all these weapons and these tools to do certain things, we have to be able to de-escalate. And if we think that de-escalating the situation, if that's the only reasonable way that we can do it based off our phases of escalation, then that's what you have to do, because if you don't do those, you may not go home.
Mm,
So
yeah.
and then as far as the social worker portion of it, man, to be honest with you, I feel sometimes when I was on patrol, I felt like I was a social worker, because you deal with more problems and social problems than anything that you mean. People think that we're running and gunning all day and
Mm,
we're arresting bad guys. Yeah, we do, but 95% of the time you're dealing with someone that's dealing with mental health. You got kids that are not listening to their parents because they're lost and they don't have any kind of guidance.
mm,
You got people that are on drugs, and I mean, you're a social worker, and
mm,
mental health is so underlooked right now, and
yeah.
it's something in the society that's not talked about, not under it's just way underlooked and understaffed, that people don't understand. Like, policing, you may be on a call with one person all day, and it's a call because they have some mental health, or
Oh,
they're
wow.
suicidal, homicidal, and you're trying to get them social help. I mean, you're trying to get them in a facility, and you could be on that
Right.
person all day or multiple hours. So that person, that one officer or two officers, is dealing with that person all day. So yeah, you have to be, you that's what I said. There's good officers, and then there's good people. I mean, that's part of being a good officer. You have to be able to turn it on and turn it off. You have to be able to know when to pull the trigger, and you have to know when to hug the baby, or help the single female who is been abused by her spouse, and you're going through the process of the family violence packets, and you have to have compassion for her. And even
Mm,
if you're making an arrest, you have to have respect for the guy who just beat his wife up, and you have to have control not to do anything that's going to jeopardize your career or someone else's career. And that's what I'm talking about, being a professional. And you have to be able to switch it on and off. And if you don't have that, it's going to be hard for you. And you may get your PD that may not see it or may not do anything right off the bat. But with the way this society is going, eventually someone's going to complain. Eventually someone's going to say something, and then they're going to have to do an investigation. And then your whole career is down the drain because you made a bonehead decision. So
mm,
yeah, I mean, it's you have to be, and I tell people all the time, I'm like, man, I like what do you do for work? And I tell them, man, I deal with everybody else's problems. Like, I have my own problems that I have to deal with, and then I got to go deal with everybody else's problems. And people are like, well, why do you do that? Why are you in policing? And I'm like, I mean, sometimes when you're getting into policing, you're thinking one aspect of this and this and that. You see the commercials, you see that. But then when you
yeah.
actually get in it and you see how much demanding it is, how physical, not even physically, but more mentally demanding, and
Yeah.
it just opens your eyes, and you don't realize that until you get in. And and it's something you have to learn, and you have to get used to. But you deal with everybody's problems, and then you got to go home and deal with all your problems. And it's like, you don't someone doesn't call you and say, hey, Officer Rodriguez, I just calling because I wanted to see how you were doing today. No, it's like, someone just stole my car, someone just robbed me, my husband just beat me up. Like, it's something, it's always negative. So when you're always
Yeah.
dealing with negative, man, it takes a toll on you, and
Yeah.
people may say, no, it doesn't, or he's being a little, whatever, and blah blah blah. I'm like, look, dude, I came into policing one type of person, and I left a totally different, and it may have been because I
Mm,
had other issues that I was dealing with internally, but I was not the same person that I went in. And you could say it's because of stress or whatever little thing, or that, the little sand effect where you just one little drop of sand. I mean, it just builds up, builds up, builds up. And then eventually it's like, dude, you got to deal with it. So
Yeah.
I used to work out a lot because I used to build up a lot of stress, and that was the one way to relieve it. But some guys don't have that relief, and some guys don't
Yeah.
have that outlet. And then that's when the guys that are having issues or doing stuff out, not rationally and making bonehead decisions. And then,
Yeah.
then they're stuck in a situation where they're like, what do you do now? Like the guy was good, but
Yeah.
then he had problems. So
Well,
yeah, it's
and
crazy.
when we see, policing has one of the highest suicide rates of any given profession, and
Hmm.
I think it was last year, one of your PD mates
Hmm.
uh, took his own life, and that's not unusual.
No.
And so, I don't, I think it would be naive to say that, like, oh, well, I don't know, some of the complaints about police officers, like, oh, they're just this, that, whatever. And it's like their job is hard and sucks. Like you just said, you're literally dealing with problems all the time.
Hmm.
And if you don't have an outlet or a way to cope with those things, to work it out, to understand it, like I don't know, I don't think you could be a police officer without God. And I know I'm not trying to be judgmental of anybody, but I'm just thinking about what you're saying. If I were an atheist police officer and there was no purpose for anything, there was no reason for it, and it's all just, then we're going to die and it's just going to be black, well, then there's no reason for your suffering. And
Hmm.
there's no way to spin a silver lining around it. Does that make sense? Like, golly. Now I know, based on our conversations that you have faith, right? You believe in
Hmm.
God.
Hmm.
What would you say is the percentage of believers to non-believers in your experience in policing?
Man, even if I tried to guess, I'd probably be, just throwing a number out there.
Yeah,
I
I'm
would say,
very curious
I
now.
would say maybe like 30% believers, 70% non-believers. If I had to guess, it could be at 50-50, easy as 50-50. Like, I don't know. I know a lot of my close friends and colleagues that I worked with, we really didn't have that conversation. We didn't really have those type of conversations. And, you know, I getting into policing has really kind of changed my outlook of like life itself, because you see how short life is when you see death, when you see your first suicide or your first death on a scene. And you just, if people tell you they don't think about what ifs, or people tell you that, man, they don't think about it, they just let it never leaves you. I mean,
Yeah,
you're always gonna close your eyes and you're gonna see a picture of someone and you're like, I remember when that happened, or I remember this, first suicide, or
yeah,
first kid that killed himself or something. Like, you're gonna remember that stuff. So that's kind of what led me. I've always kind of been a believer. Like, this is kind of like my background. Like, I always grew up like Catholic. My parents were Catholic, but we didn't really know what we were Catholic. I mean, you just go to
right.
church, you sit down,
Yeah,
dad would pinch you if you talked or something, and you just heard the pastor talk. You really didn't know what you were
mm-hmm.
really what they were talking about, but you heard God, you heard different things and different words, and you're like, okay, there is a God. He came here. He did this. He died for our sins. You know the basic stuff, but you don't really
Yeah,
know what you're doing. So I think when I joined policing, I kind of had a newfound faith, and and really found the Christian side of the spiritual Christian
mm-hmm.
believer. And we started kind of going to different churches, and then we eventually finally found the church that was meant for us. But I don't really think I knew, even when I was doing the policing, what really the Bible was about, what God was about. I just knew I believed in him. I knew he was there. I knew there was a higher power. I knew there was someone that's always looking out for me, because there's things I can't
Yeah,
explain that happened in my life that he helped me with. And then, of course, when I was deployed, many times almost, coming close to death. And, it's like, I know there's a purpose for me, and I know there was a reason. So,
yeah,
like, whenever all this stuff started happening to me, I got more close to God, and I found a church that really showed me what fellowship and all that's about. And that kind of
Yeah.
opened my eyes, and it was like another way of me knowing that I made the right decision, because in that,
Good.
you go to church and you reading scripture and things that the church is talking about the day that you leave the PD or the week you leave the PD and retire, and they're talking about toxic work environments and get away from those situations. It's like he's speaking to you because he's telling you like this is what you were supposed to do, and
Yeah.
this is where you're supposed to be. So yeah, it's hard to say, but I would say 30% believers, 70% non-believers. I could be wrong. Maybe
Yeah.
some people think they believe and think they know, but maybe they don't. I mean, there's a lot of people that say they believe in God and they don't really know what that really means. And maybe I don't really even know
Oh,
what it means.
yeah.
I'm still learning. So it's just one of
Yeah.
those things.
That's what my old sponsor used to say. There's a difference between believing in God and trusting God. And I'd oh yeah, or this is the story she would tell. She said believing in God is who's the guy that would walk the tightrope across the Grand Canyon? Oh crap, I can't remember his name. But it'd be okay. Believing in God is like watching the guy cross the tightrope, cross the Grand Canyon on a tightrope and seeing he can do it, right? And like, oh great, he crossed the tightrope and it's great. Trusting God is getting in the wheelbarrow that the guy is pushing across the Grand Canyon on the tightrope. And I was like,
Mm,
that is an excellent,
yeah,
excellent
yeah.
image. And I've certainly found it true in my own life when you really get tested and then you go, okay, what do I really believe? What do I
Yep.
really believe about God? What does that actually mean? What does that look like? And you just nailed it. So, okay, so knowing, talking about, again, we talked about a lot of the bad and the ugly, right? Whether it's
Hmm.
people who are saying that all, a cab and like, if a police officer, you're automatically racist, all that crap. We've got the
Hmm.
administration who can be working against you and can actively be making a toxic work environment. But there's also the good, which we also have talked about, and
Hmm.
what you get out of that, and your care for the community and wanting to be helpful. So in
Hmm.
our last minutes here today, David, I want you to share something positive. So anybody thinking about being a police officer, anybody who's listening or watching who's thinking about getting into law enforcement, like what are some, like, give 3 pieces of advice so that they can avoid some of the either avoid or mitigate some of the nonsense that you had to deal with. What should they be looking for? What can they do? What should they avoid?
Well, I think you're never going to avoid it. It's just embracing it. Embracing the fact that
Mm,
you're dealing with a lot of you're going to be dealing with it. One way or another. But just don't go looking for the gossip. Don't go looking for people that are in those circles that are talking about your own brothers and apparently
mm,
brothers and sisters in the force. And just stay away from it. I mean, there's a lot of positive things with policing. There's a lot of ways you can give back and serve and really give back to your community. My personal best thing that I enjoyed, or my favorite thing in policing, was when I was an SRO for the high schools. I was able to be an
mm.
SRO for 2 high schools, and that really opened my eyes to like my calling. Like I really enjoyed being able to interact with the kids. I mean, I got a teenager. She's 13, about to be 14. So I got one right up the right. Next year is going to be going to high school. So I
Yep.
really could connect to being like a positive role model, and then you could see like it's a difference between like you rolling up on a person that's kind of like maybe a little lost, and they're like, hey, what's up, Officer Rodriguez, like, how are you doing, and they don't have, and they ask you how's your day. But then there's a difference between like a high school kid comes up to you and is like, hey, Officer Rodriguez, how are you doing, and they're like all in your circle and they're all in your bubble, and they're so friendly, but they're so like innocent at the same time because they don't
Yeah.
know that I'm trying to back away because I'm not. And then when I first got into the school, I'm like, do I get close? Do I get back? I mean, these are kids. Like, so it's that kind of you can get that, you get that feeling where you're like a positive role model to them. And then I've had
Yeah.
so many
You
kids that
matter.
would, yeah, you matter, and they see you, and they would come up to you and they would be like, hey, Officer Rodriguez, I had a few questions. I'm thinking about getting in law enforcement, and I would always tell them like, hey, get into policing is like any other profession. You may get into it and love it. You may get into it and hate it. But the only way you're going to know is if you go in and try it and give your best effort. And I tell people all the time, even with my rookies, I would be like, you don't know until you are in and you're in the process and you're going through the motions, and if
Mm,
you're going to like this. And if you don't like it, there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, this is not for me. I'm going to go do something else. And I would tell rookies all the
yeah.
time. I said that, there's no shame in that. That happiness to me, like me personally, happiness is the best thing that I found for myself, that I want in my life. I don't need to have all the money. I don't need to have all the fame. I don't need to have the glory. I just need to have happiness. And if my kids are in a
Mm,
good place and I'm able to provide for them, that's all I'm looking for. So I would tell people all the time, you have to be happy where you're at. And, I was happy where I was at. And, there's a lot of good things when it comes to policing in the schools. And then once I left the schools and I went back to patrol, then I kind of just opened my eyes to, like, I had to make a decision. Like, it's not going to work
mm,
where I'm doing here. I'm gonna go back and do something else. So, but yeah, find your niche. Like, there's a lot of positive things you can do if you're one of those guys that likes to handle dogs and likes to go and find drugs and tries to get drugs off the street. That's a positive thing. Just be good at it and just be
mm.
be passionate about it. But
That makes
it's just
sense.
there's just a lot of things that people misconstrue with policing, but there's a lot of good things. There's a lot of relationships you can build with not just your colleagues, but relationships that you build with people that you help on the street, and then you walk into that community and you run into them one day and they're like, "Hey, Officer Rodriguez, you really helped me out. Like, this is,"
Yeah.
and that's something that money can't buy. That kind of, you help my son out, or he's going down the straight path and he's not doing this and that, and he's actually trying to become this or this. That's what you're like, man, this is what I got into this job for, to try
Yep.
to help someone that's going down that wrong path, kind of make a left turn and say, look, this is not the way I want to go. I want to go this way, and get them back into the right way of where they're trying to go. And, that right there is all I needed. I'd still be in contact with kids. They'd find me on Facebook and find out that I'm not an officer no more and be like, what happened, Officer Rodriguez? We loved you. And I'm like, my time was up. My next chapter, my
Yep.
next thing I'm doing in my life, I got to move on,
Yeah.
and if you dwell in it, you can get a little sad and get upset. You're like, man, I wish maybe I could have did a little bit better, got a little higher in my ranking. But then at the end of the day, you're just like, I'm happy now. I'm happy what I'm doing. My kids are good. My family's good. And that's all I can say, and if you're doing it for the wrong reasons, eventually it's gonna catch up to you, and it's gonna hit you, and you're gonna be like, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
So, but yeah,
Yep.
as far as positive, just find your niche, do it for the right reasons, get in it to the right reasons, serve, go above and beyond as much as you can, and you'll be fine. My situation, I think it was a little bit of God kind of getting me out of this to get me in another path.
Mm,
I think there's a lot of things that happen that I can't explain, but I think they happen for a reason. So I
yeah.
just have to take it for what it's worth. Like, if you don't want me in that profession no more, then put me where you want me. And he's put me somewhere where I think I'm going to make a bigger difference with not just my church, but other churches in the future.
I love it. I love it, David. This is so great. I appreciate you coming on today, sharing the information. For those of you out there watching, just remember there is always two sides to every story. And even those of us who are sure that we know everything that there is to know on earth, there's always another side. There's always someone experiencing something different. And if we take the time to actually learn what is going on, to be with one another, to be in community, we can solve these problems. We can have
Hmm.
police departments that are functioning with humility and testosterone.
Hmm.
We can have all of the things that we need to be happy and healthy. If we just can stop demonizing each other and stabbing each other in the back, that's the biggest thing. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for joining us today on Generally Irritable. Our guest was David Rodriguez, former police officer here in Central Texas, sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly of policing. Join us next week. We've got a special surprise for you. Just kidding. It's going to be a normal show. Come visit us next Tuesday. I'll let you know ahead of time when who we're going to be having on. So make sure to come back. And Speaking of coming back, we're going to close out with the reasons to trust the government commercial. Y'all just remember you can go to Amazon.com for just $9.99 and buy your own edition of Reasons to Trust the Government.
This book will give you wings!
What kind of wings?
Not like Icarus wings, like eagle's wings!
What about dragons?
You'll have dragon's blood! You'll be able to breathe fire!
Fire like the Ultra Eagle Dragogon!
This book will make you smarter!
Yes!
I'm not just talking honor roll smart, I'm talking Nikola Tesla smart! You'll be so good looking, Brad Pitt will be jealous!
Do you want to make money?
How much money?
Elon Musk money.
That's a lot of money!
People will think you're Elon Musk, but you're not Elon Musk, but they'll think you're
Elon Musk, because you pay taxes like Elon Musk!
And you have to argue with Elizabeth Warren because she thinks you're Elon Musk. Do you want freedom?
How much freedom?
All the freedom. One to America. How much freedom do you want?
America!
Double America! Yeah!